Hello there. Welcome back to the Dev Game Club podcast. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined tonight by a man who will end a sentence with a preposition if he darn well wants to.
Tim Longo.
There you go. I know. You don't even know when I'm going to...
I'm stunned. I'm stunned. I was like... I also was trying to think of a preposition to end my name with.
Tim Longo to... last time, we finished off our beta series about System Shock 2 with a conversation between ourselves and Irrational Games co-founder, and designer of System Shock 2, Ken Levine. That was fantastic, huh, Tim?
It was very fun. Very fun. He was a good guest. I'm really happy that we got him on. It's perfect. It was a perfect guest for kind of our first series, you know, even though it was beta. I think we start with a bang. I think we're going to have a high bar now for ourselves to keep that up.
Absolutely. I mean, the conversation kind of was wide-ranging and covered a ton of stuff, but I could have just, kept on going pretty much indefinitely. That was really, really fantastic. And he recalls quite a lot, and it was a good guess too, because he started basically right between us in terms of when he started in the industry. You started in 96 and I started in 98, and I think he started in 96 or 7. So that was really cool. Actually, I think he said 95. So right around the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was good.
Yeah. So for those joining us, maybe for their first session, or maybe have been playing along, I hope, we're turning in this second group of podcasts to Hitman 2 Silent Assassin. Yes?
Yes. Silent Assassin, which is those are two important words for the series, which I'll talk about later.
So, I mean, one of the things we talked about previously is that this is not a series that I'm personally familiar with. My only encounter really with the Hitman series has been through a forgettable 2007 movie starring Timothy Olyphant and the Hitman Go mobile game, a very board game-like game, which I really, really quite like. I mean, I've played all of the missions in that, and I know that there are some missions which cross over. But that's really my only exposure. I've never played any of these sort of third-person, over-the-shoulder Hitman assassination games. So why don't you tell me a little bit more about them, and tell our audience about their history and why they matter to you.
Yeah, I mean, I will fully admit I'm a big Hitman fan, so I think I was definitely strongly encouraging us to do Hitman early on. One of the things that we're going to try to do with the series, even though we're playing older games, of course, we want to have relevant games or significant games when we can, and also things that are sort of in the collective subconscious right now or consciousness right now. And Hitman, of course, the sort of episodic new semi-reboot has just come out, and so it's kind of in the news, and so it kind of jogged my memory that would be a good one. And the other reason I kind of wanted to, being a big fan of the series, I wanted Brett and I to play is because typically the way that you play Hitman varies from player to player quite a bit, or it can. And so it's usually pretty fun to hear how people, choose to play each of the missions and talk about what they discovered, what they didn't discover, et cetera. And so therein sort of lies part of the relevance for me, but also I think in an indirect way, kind of its impact on a few different games. And it's an interesting series because unlike System Shock 2, it's easier for that with System Shock 2 to see some direct trying to breadcrumb connections from game to game to game, especially because BioShock was so similar to System Shock 2, as we talked about.
Yep,
Hitman, it's harder to find the direct relevance or impact that Hitman 2 would have on other games, with the exception of sort of just the stealth genre in general, which is funny because we're not going to talk about obviously all of the games because we're not playing all of them, but I'll throw in some examples from the later games as we go, because they try different things with the franchise that kind of sometimes breaks the franchise, and then the new one seems to be returning to form.
I'm kind of curious about that because, I think of it, and we'll probably get into this, but it feels a lot different from other stealth games I've played. It's maybe closest to me to Thief of stealth games I've played, and not a lot like Metal Gear Solid or something like that. Like you're well, I don't know. It's kind of in between. So it certainly doesn't have the depth and craziness of the story of a Metal Gear Solid or something like that, but it does feel different in some way. I'll have to think about that while you're going on.
Well, I'm I'm also a really big fan of stealth games in general, as you know, and I play them all. I love them all, and one of the things that I like about the Hitman games, there's two vectors that I'd like to talk about when it comes to the themes and the relevance. And one is you mentioned Thief and you mentioned Metal Gear. Both handle, I would say, action differently than Hitman does. And also both of them handle their sandbox quite a bit differently. And those are the two kind of biggest relevant games that would have come out before this one, Hitman 2 at least. So Metal Gear Solid was 1998 on PlayStation 1, and then Hitman 1 was 2000, and then Hitman 2 that we're playing was 2002. Thief, I think we talked about, was 98 as well.
Yes,
right?
Very late 1998, yeah.
And one of the big differences for me, and why I think I keep this franchise keeps resonating with me, is that it is a blend of stealth and action is an okay way to play. It is a relevant way to play. It's maybe not the greatest shooter, but it gives you all the tools if you want to just be a psychopath, which I want to talk about that particular word later. You can. And when you play a Thief game or even a Metal Gear game, when you get discovered, the punishment for that and the punishment for sort of resetting the state of the world is actually pretty extreme in those games. In the Thief games, you're not very valuable as a hand-to-hand combatant, and as an action game, in an action game context, you're very vulnerable. In Metal Gear, you can get by, but really back in those days, it really wasn't easy to make it into an action game. But Hitman, if you want to, especially in 2, as I'm kind of remembering playing this again, because it's been a long time since I played this particular one, you can alert people, you can do pretty well and pretty much take everyone out and finish the mission in a couple minutes, and get out of there. And that's okay. And that sense of allowing the player to have that option, both on the two extremes, both action and both in stealth, is kind of one of the important things for me with this series, and why I think it's resonated with me. I'm not a psychopath, and I don't necessarily want to be. I don't think I am. I don't necessarily want to be a hitman. So the killing part, ironically, isn't even the focus for me. I just love all of the rules that they put together into a mission. What were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to say it's interesting to me that looking at Thief in particular, that's a game which puts a priority on the thief aspect aside from the any assassination that might happen as a result. And in many of the thief missions, especially if you're playing on the harder difficulty levels, you're directly given a goal to not kill anyone, and failing that resets the game. I mean, you have to replay the mission or from your last save or whatever. So that means a failure. Like here, there's none of that, which was kind of surprising to me. But at the same time, it feels like the aesthetic of the game is meant to be, you're this, super assassin who I don't know. I sort of thought of like Leon the Professional, like a guy who can slip in, make his way up 4 flights of stairs, and walk up behind the guy and put the blade to his neck. Right? That was kind of the fantasy I had. Although, to be sure, in The Professional, he does kill basically everybody on the way. So, I don't know, it kind of fits both, right? But my thinking was, all right, here's a guy who's going to slip in undetected. He's obviously built to handle anything, and apparently wear any uniform. But he's not, his goal isn't, kill everybody. In fact, even on the sort of mission screens at the end, it'll say, you killed this many innocent people. So there is like, a moral framework there that sort of emphasizes this, like only kill the target. But again, it's like you say, it's not a hard limit. Metal Gear is totally different. Like you can, the reason why you can't go around killing indiscriminately is that you'll just end up losing by overwhelming force. I mean, you're resource limited more than anything else. Here, I didn't feel that, but I guess we'll get into all of that probably in the second part.
Yeah, and I wanted to use an example. One of the points I wanted to make when it comes to the play style, kind of the depth in play style that this series has, and this game in particular kind of ups the ante. With one specific example that I'll give is that the chloroform or the what do they call
anesthetic.
The anesthetic that was actually added to this game. It wasn't in the first game, and the main reason they did that was because they wanted people to have that non-lethal option. And it was feedback from the first one, and they also added a lot of accessibility stuff in the second one. But I want to read a list here of the different rankings you can get in the game after you finish a mission. So Silent Assassin is the top, Professional, Expert, Executioner, Sociopath, Psychopath, Cleaner, Button Man, Natural, Ninja Extraordinaire, Iceman, Ghost, Shadow, Postal, Slayer, Hired Gun, Sniper, Cutthroat, Hitman, Butcher, Mass Murderer, Henchman, and Hatchet Man. So my point here is that, yeah, and so really each one of those is a play style. Each one of those, so they have a bunch of obviously data behind the scenes and different ways that they're going to track what you're doing and how you actually accomplish your missions, and then they're going to rank you. And they introduced that, I believe, in this game, and they keep that throughout all the rest of the games. And so the point of that is that they're gonna basically tag you as who you are when you play. And so as you could see, one of them, one of the ranks is called Mass Murderer. And I think you can guess what that is. Yeah. Okay. So is that, did you get that for one of yours?
I did. Yeah.
Okay.
At least one.
And so, sociopath, psychopath, anyway, that's kind of one of the I wanted to read that list because that's one of the coolest things about the franchise for me is that it tries, and it gets better and better at this as the games go on. It tries to let you do things the way you want to do things. And there's definitely rules within the game. You mentioned kind of wearing different outfits and that's a particular mechanic that is another goal for their sandbox style of level design and systems design, where they have these little mechanics like that are expanded upon and have many uses. And if you generally that concept of if you think about the idea of doing it, generally you could try to do it and it could actually accomplish a goal for you. And so now that you can put on different clothes from people that you take out, that's now a tool that you can use. And so you can actually leverage that in interesting ways throughout the series. Right.
Yeah, we'll definitely get into that because that's something I figured out pretty quickly on my own. And I think the game does reward that pretty well. So I'll definitely want to talk about that as one of my sort of positives, when we talk about the first few levels. I'd like to talk about the story, but before that, I think we should. You've mentioned like years and the developer briefly. I just want to kind of set the stage for that. This was IO Interactive, who are now part of IDOS, which makes them part of Square Enix. I guess they kind of got rolled up into that big tarball over the last
IDOS bought them a while
back.
Yeah, and now they're part of Square Enix. Yeah.
Okay, and then as you mentioned, it came out in 2002. It was only their second game. Mm-hmm. It was right before a game that we actually looked at for Republic Commando called Freedom Fighters, which I had forgotten they had done. So it was kind of interesting looking that up and seeing that in their past history.
Some other games.
That was an Xbox game. I guess we mostly looked at it on Xbox. I guess it was mostly console and PC. And then, what else have they have done?
Well, so Hitman generally was their focus most of their history. They did Kane and Lynch.
Right.
They did a funny little game which I actually enjoyed quite a bit called Mini Ninjas, which I played with my daughter back in the day.
Okay.
A few years ago. But Hitman really has been the focus for the studio. Other than Kane and Lynch and Freedom Fighters, which I think I heard that they got the rights back for Freedom Fighters at some point. because it was under EA's banner. So anyway, I don't know why they're not doing more of those. But some other games that came out in 2002, just to give people sort of the sense of the landscape. Warcraft 3 came out that year. We have Battlefield 1942 came out that year.
Yep.
Which is The Thing, which is one that I remember. Let's see, Animal Crossing. Let's see, Sly Cooper, another good one.
Favorite of mine for sure.
Yep.
Love that series. We mentioned that in connection with the last game.
Spyro 2. I'm just kind of skimming here. The ones that I think are relevant. Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance, which is a kind of a console.
Right,
Hallmark,
good co-op game. Yep, good fun
game. Jedi Starfighter.
Yep,
which I'll just throw in there. So anyway,
that's sort of the landscape of when this game's coming out.
And also a little game called Metroid Prime, which is an interesting one to come out that year because it was also kind of genre bending for a franchise that that hadn't done that before.
Right, right. Yeah, absolutely, fantastic. Yeah, that's quite a selection.
Wind Waker as well. Yeah.
And Wind Waker. Oh my God, what a great year. There's a lot of good games. We could probably focus on 1 year and do like one, a whole year of games per podcast.
Oh shoot, Allied Assault came out as well. Medal of Honor Allied Assault, which was basically the beginning. That was old, Is
that Peter Hirschman?
No, maybe. That was the early Infinity Ward, right? It was before they were Infinity Ward, right? That was, what were they? 25th, 20. What was their? It was a year. Anyway, the name of the company.
Anyway, yeah, we'd have to look that back up. Peter Hirschman, somebody from our LucasArts history, who had given us some feedback on Republic Commando, especially on basically chatter and stuff like that, like environmental feel and things like that. He was development director or something for a hot minute in the ever rotating shuffle of executives at LucasArts. But
and one more that I want to quickly mention because we've talked about it before is Deus Ex. Came out in 2000. Of course.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Good year for games. We had so many good years when we were coming up.
Morrowind as well. Anyway, so it was a big year, and a lot of different things, and I think some of the comparisons that people make with this particular game in this series, especially at this time, they talk about because it was when you're in kind of action mode, even though there are first person modes, your third person action kind of side of things, and so Max Payne comes up. To some degree is some comparisons, and again, not as good of a shooter as Max Payne, but also Max Payne is much more of a specific kind of game versus this one that gives you a lot more freedom. Yeah, right,
absolutely. One thing that's probably worth doing, especially for me, who has a little contact with the series, is doing a little bit of stage setting. Like my understanding from the very beginning of this game is. This guy's some kind of genetically made guy of some sort, which is kind of introduced in the cutscene. And the game starts, and we'll kind of go from here in the second half, but the game starts with him basically atoning for his sins like Rambo style on Sicily in a monastery. That's kind of what I got, right, is that he has maybe decided to retire or is hiding out. It's not really clear to me, at least from starting to play. So I was wondering if you could kind of set the stage for me a little bit in terms of what was going on in Hitman 1. Just like the high marks. Like I don't need. I'm sure there's 20 levels in that one too, and I don't really need to know beat for beat. But like an overview of, okay, this is this guy, and this is why he wears these crisp suits or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, his persona isn't ever really kind of fully, I think, fleshed out about where his signature look comes from per se. But so the Hitman 1 starts in a very weird kind of way because it actually starts in a sanatorium. Agent 47 is seemingly either a crazy person in there or is just basically escaping from that, and that's how the tutorial starts. And so you're in a straitjacket, et cetera, and it's a weird way to open a game about a hitman, and I think it kind of references Subject 47, I think, early on, and so you kind of know there's some mystery behind who you are, right? And then once
and it's really unusual for a game to start off with a prisoner.
Yeah, right. Yeah, a crazy person.
You just mentioned that Morrowind, and not to mention all the Elder Scrolls games.
Yeah.
But yes, go ahead.
And so and also I think somebody's on the loudspeaker talking him through it as he escapes. And I think that comes back into play later. But anyway,
you're still seeing this stuff in like the darkness, Dead Space 2, like.
Yeah,
maybe this is where this trope started. I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's not. Yeah, I mean, it's not.
I mean, it's a good trope, right? Yeah, because it lets the player be like we were talking about with System Shock 2, which starts you off with amnesia, right? It's a sort of here's a way to put you into the world and make it make sense, that you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about this series overall, which I think is one of its weaknesses, is that they should have kept that mystery behind 47. Basically, they should have kept it longer, right? And kind of had it be a kind of a cornerstone. And unfortunately, over the course of each game, they give you more and more about his backstory and becomes more convoluted and kind of more ridiculous over time. So anyway, we'll talk about that as we play. But after you escape from the sanitarium, it's a year later, and you're already working for the International Contract Agency, which is ICA, and I think that's who Diana, your contact is working for. And as kind of is the case for most of the games, most of it is really these just the hits, the contracts that you're doing with these specific goals peppered in that have to do with his backstory. And so in one, you eventually find out, yes, crazy stuff like, oh my God, Agent 47 is actually a clone. And of course, and is, cloned to be an experimental sort of perfect human. And then
I like games with clones that are perfect humans. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, sure. Exactly. Themes all over. And then the professor that kind of created this whole thing is revealed, and then you chase him down. You meet I believe you meet Subject 48, which is obviously the 48th clone. And then you're basically throughout all of the hits in between all of the main ones that Diana's sending you on, you're actually going after the professor, who is actually responsible for everything. And then the game ends, after you have taken out 48, you impersonate 48, and then you confront the professor, obviously tricking him, and then you take him out. And that's where one ends. You basically have gotten revenge, the person who has created you, your father, quote unquote. And then I believe that's what he means by he's been atoning for his sins in the opening of 2.
So that's interesting. I mean, it makes me think, and I mean, this is so on the nose, it makes me think Frankenstein's monster, right? I mean, he's off hanging out with an old man, good. Right? And in a shed. I mean, if the priest himself were blind, it would be about as on the nose as you could be. But yeah, it seems very very similar.
Interesting. I never made that connection. We'll have to find out if that's a
real thing. Yeah. I mean, but it definitely comes off. I mean, science experiment, right? I mean, wow, that's interesting. There is kind of a sense. There is, like I said, this introductory cutscene, and it's very brief and it's not really clear, but they sort of say something like, why would they make more out of this genetic material or something like that. So I kind of got the sense that he was like either a mix or just some kind of experiment. A clone makes total sense. Yeah. That's interesting.
It's pretty, yeah. I mean, it's kind of...
This is a weird world we're in.
Yeah. And it's hard to really... Like I said earlier, it's really not, personally, it's not the reason I love the series and why I play the series. It kind of gets in the way for me. I really like I think my favorite one so far, and I haven't played the new one yet, but my favorite one so far is really Blood Money, which is technically the 4th game. And that kind of all that clone stuff and all of his backstory is very light in there. And you're really just kind of on contracts, kind of building your cred back up after previous events. And so, the third one's kind of like that too. So those are my favorite ones.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, that's good to know. Like I had a sense that was what was going on, that he's some kind of genetic Superman or whatever. Like he looks like it. Yeah, it's pretty good. I guess, putting this in 2002, like sitting down and playing it, some of the technical features that stood out to me were like,
yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Yeah,
because I was like, oh wow, I was surprised. Not just one shadow, but maybe multiple shadows from different light sources.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty technically proficient. And the other thing that it reminded me, just like out of the box, was art wise, design wise, graphic design wise, it feels like they made really good choices. And maybe we'll talk about this more in the sort of second half, but it feels like they made very good choices with texture density and sort of blocky colors instead of, just sort of strong silhouettes rather than lots of texture detail.
Mm-hmm.
So it has actually held up remarkably well, I thought, technically. Like looking at it, it doesn't, it reminds me of like No One Lives Forever 2, for example, which I think was very similar, though they did a lot more with texture density. This actually like made a different sort of choice with the same sort of result, like that it holds up much better than I would expect something at the time to do. Like the character art here is really good enough. Obviously it doesn't look anything like you'd see on a modern console, but it's solid and not distracting. Everybody looks the same, but everybody always looked the same back in those days. So that doesn't really bother me. What I do really appreciate is that good graphic design of like his character design and other character design means, solid colors, not a lot of texture that's going to look muddy. It doesn't look like something, it's sort of like, oddly enough, it's sort of like Wind Waker in that way, right? It's
pure.
These kind of, pure colors, right? Very almost abstract in that way, just like a solid block of this, solid block of that, red tie down the middle, right? And that's really interesting to me.
Well, the visual language of the series is really important to the series, right? Like if you think, well, we'll get into it more when we get to the second segment, but if you think about the guards in St. Petersburg, it's really important that you understand, very quickly can see one of the military, guards, which are in gray versus the private guards, which are in suits, and
right.
And even in Sicily, in Anathema, different henchmen for the mafia boss. A few of them have different shirts and different outfits on, and actually that's an important thing depending on what you do with those characters. Because there's always a hierarchy. There tends to be a hierarchy or relevance to who you're going to dress up as, and so you need to learn kind of the pecking order or the essentially the factions, if you will,
right.
Because it's going to obviously have an impact on you. So that
right, and it seems like that's important to know because this is just me reading it, and you got to like understand that I've got a couple of hours of Hitman, but it's really important to know that. Because those characters interact with each other in specific ways, particularly like if you're in a group, like say you take the bodyguard's clothing or something like that. If you're in that group, they're going to respond. Those other guys in that group are going to respond to you differently than, these are things I've kind of picked up along the way. We'll get to all of that in part 2. But because I'm going to really struggle with this game, I think. I'm just going to tell you that right here off the bat.
That's what I was afraid of.
Episode.
Yeah, you mentioned offline that I want to hear more about how you're bouncing off of it as you have in the past, and I was kind of afraid of that, but I'm also, if hopefully, you're in it now, like we're committed, right?
Yeah,
so we're going to go through it, and I'm
going to go through it.
I'm really kind of, for my own personal interest, excited to play through with you to hear all the times.
To hear my misery.
Yep, exactly. All the times you bounce off of it and why and how I've been putting you through this torture. Another quick kind of.
That's probably why we have this podcast. I appreciate it.
Pretty much. You can force me to play Final Fantasy after this or something. Another theme / in the relevance and in historical side for this game, which history is a strong word maybe, but this was also one of this first series, other than obviously Thief, and we talked about Metal Gear, but it's a kind of a different flavor of what I'm about to say. I always refer to them as patience simulators. And I'm a pretty patient person in real life. And I think whenever and I think that's probably why I like stealth games in general, whenever there's a game that really rewards patience and being, good observation and good exploration, I really love games that do that. And so, to play this the way that I play it, which is generally, I always try to go after Silent Assassin ranking, which I'll talk about later. It requires this sort of patience and discipline, which is very, very much an antithesis to a lot of games, and basically the industry as a whole is very much not about that, right? It's fantasy fulfillment, high fantasy fulfillment, wish fulfillment, and just the glory of being the hero. Where you can, luckily in this game, you can be a mass murderer if you want to, but they're going to tell you that you have been.
Right.
And so I just love that
they're judging you.
Yeah. And I love it. Well, and that they have chosen to make the highest, most difficult rank to show how skilled you really are, the Silent Assassin's rank, which means you're going in, killing minimally, if not at all. And the mark is still dead. And by the end of the mission, but people may not realize how they died, or it looks like an accident, and you're just in and out. They didn't even know you were there. And that's they have declared that's
the pinnacle, right? And that makes a lot of sense to me, and that's exactly why I'm bouncing off. So we'll get back to that after a break.
Okay.
Welcome back from the break. I'm here with my co-host, Tim Longo. We're talking about Hitman 2 Silent Assassin. And we want to dig right into the 4 levels we played, which is really 3 levels, let's be honest. Right? Yeah.
Yeah. The tutorial, we should have counted it.
Probably didn't need to count that one. Although it was useful for me because I ended up playing a couple levels more than once. So it was
you
like
needed
I played
the time to get into it.
Yeah, it was worthwhile for me to have a little more space, not to have to allocate hours and hours in my schedule to do, twice as many missions or something.
Yeah,
which we'll do, I think, next time. But so this tutorial, I mean, you wanted to talk a little bit about the storytelling, and the feel of the series, from these opening cutscenes at this monastery. So why don't you take that away?
Yeah, I think one of the other reasons that this franchise is kind of resonated with me is the style and the mood and the feel. It's got a like you said, kind of a somber and melancholy, kind of a European feel is what I would describe it. I'm a big John le Carré fan, and kind of the espionage sort of side of it. It's not, obviously you're not a spy, but there's that tone of it.
Right.
And each of the locations, typically later on in the game, they do a better job at kind of being more diverse with the places that you go. But in the first couple games, it has that kind of European feel to it. And examples in the opening cinematics for the monastery. There aren't very many games in 2002 that opened up with a close-up shot of someone picking a tomato, and
that's true.
Not showing their face, and of course, it's Agent 47 or what have you, and he's got a bucket, and just choices and knowing, because I worked, kind of as a sister studio with IO when I was at Crystal. So I got to know some of the IO folks really pretty well, and knowing them and kind of the Danish kind of sensibility about things there. It's like you can kind of see why the series is what it is.
Right. And it's less like I don't know, Mission Impossible and more like Bridge of Spies, right? I mean, it's
totally.
it definitely a totally different kind of feel. Not that, I mean, Bridge of Spies obviously is still an American production, but like just of something I've seen recently that has kind of a more somber tone to it. I mean, it's not a big action thing in that case. So that also distinguishes it, but it's more about a different sort of tone, right? It's not, you're going to do these crazy high wire, it's not flying through Italy in an Assassin's Creed game or something like that. It's like, it's very grounded.
You're walking through the streets of St. Petersburg, St. Petersburg in the snow, and the snow's crunching under your feet, and it's it's very 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 little is happening, and So anyway, that kind of tone of things, and I think that opening cinematic starts setting some of that up.
Yeah, I was surprised how little there was to the tutorial. I kind of expected it to tell me some stuff. In particular, like there was a lot of stuff I kind of figured out as I went, which is not necessarily bad, but it's just unusual these days. So I've kind of become unaccustomed to it. And because I don't have like a box or anything, I digitally downloaded this game. I don't have a manual. There probably is one attached to my Steam account, and I just didn't go looking for it, but I didn't go looking for it. I didn't think to. And I probably should have. So what you can learn basically in the tutorial area is just some basic navigation. There's like the tiniest little playground outside your shed door that you can go into and kind of like, this is how to run and climb ladders. And that's about it. There's like, don't fall from this high. I mean, there's like, it teaches you very, very few things, which I was kind of surprised by.
I was just going to say that it's actually, the series is sort of notoriously bad at tutorialization for sure, because there is a lot, like we talked about in the first segment, there are a lot of systems and mechanics in the game that are very much, you have to discover them, how to use the wire, the garrote for on people. And there's a lot of things you have to kind of trial and error your way through, which I think is another theme for the whole series. And they get much better at that in the later games from an accessibility standpoint. But I'm kind of always mixed on that, because the discovery can be pretty exciting, but it's also frustrating because the punishment for failure is so high.
Yeah. So let's get right to that, because the next mission, like, okay, so basic storytelling stuff. The tutorial is like, you can go and you can figure out how to move around. Then you go meet this priest who's been looking over you. You speak to him in the confession, which is more that sort of melancholy feel and stuff like that. He definitely he's atoning. Mm-hmm. Then his priest is kidnapped by, I guess, it seems to be a mafia don in like a Ferrari or something. There's actually, I really like the physicality of that cutscene, because he picks the priest up, who's a much smaller character, and kind of throws him in the back seat like a sack of potatoes. Mm-hmm. It actually looks really good for the time. I was actually really impressed.
Yeah, it's good animations.
I thought that was really, really good. I really liked that. I was like, I'm going to love this game. And then I go out, and you can find your weapons at that point. Get the ballers, I guess, are his twin shooters. You get that, and then you can go and you can shoot up stuff in the garden, and then you basically take the first mission, which is, we need you to kill this Don who kidnapped your priest buddy. So that's kind of all the setup you get. And then you're taken to that location in a load screen. You get a little cutscene kind of indicating what kind of environment you're entering. It's basically a villa of some kind. It's a walled villa, so you can't just you can't just shoot the guy from afar. You're going to have to get up inside and close. Okay, I like that. That's good. And it points out a couple of characters that you're going to need to know about, one of whom is somebody delivering groceries, and the other of whom is, I guess, a mailman. Mm-hmm. And then it says, go. Okay, so here are the things that happened to me with the mailman.
I can't wait. because it's so cumbersome and awkward. Like it all came, just streaming back to me when I started playing again about how janky some of this stuff really is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing that happens, I run down the hill. The mailman sees me, freaks out, and I decide I better reload the level. So I haven't even done anything. Yeah. Okay, all right. Now I know. The mailman's going to come through this gate. Like, I thought I had already seen him walking on this road in the cutscene. That's why I was kind of surprised. I was like, okay, that's fine. I didn't lose much there. So then I run down over to where he's going to come in, and I walk up, and then I'm like, what am I going to do to this guy? So I figure out how to use the inventory. That's all fine. Not a problem. And I see the anesthetic, and I'm like, oh, that's good. I'll use the anesthetic. And so I walk up behind him, and he freaks out and runs because I'm not in stealth mode.
Yeah. And I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
There's time too. So then, because I'm used to moving more quickly in games, and that's one thing that you talked about in the first segment is like there's a lot of
it's a walking
patience.
Simulator.
There's a lot of walking, a lot more that I was comfortable with. But actually, that's not even the biggest deal. That's not the thing that made me bounce off the hardest. No, so the next thing that happens is that. This time I'm like, oh man, I'm never going to catch up to this guy because I move so slowly when I'm stealth. So did I go into stealth too soon? So I come out of stealth and then he sees me. Okay, you get the idea. Like this is like 5 times before I actually get to the guy and he's like peeing in a bush. I give him the anesthetic and I'm like, okay, cool. So I start dragging him. I put on his uniform. I'm like, I get that because it's like one of the things that lets me do. I'm like, oh, okay, that's how I get in. That's cool. And when I put on the uniform, it says postal officers don't use weapons. I'm like, that's true. Okay. And I pick up some flowers and then I drag the body and he wakes
realistic game. Come on.
He wakes up while I'm dragging him.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, you're kidding me.
Yeah.
So it's another time, a couple more times. Like I do it a couple times and he wakes up like halfway. I'm like dragging him all the way up to this hill. I'm like, okay. Finally, I just dose him with all the anesthetic I have. That seems to keep him down. And I just leave him there. And I take his uniform. And I go to where the grocery guy has been bringing stuff into the villa.
Yeah.
Because that was in the binoculars when you start in the initial cutscene.
Mm-hmm.
And I go through that door. And there's two guards. And almost immediately they start shooting me. Because I have guns.
Right. Yeah, you got to Q, I think, is the default, right? Like you to holster your weapons.
It's not you can't. It's not even holstering them because
you're a mailman.
They frisk me.
Yeah. Right.
So it's just like this is what it's like. And then I realize, oh, okay. So then I figure out I fiddle with the inventory because I'm like, well, this is how I'm getting in. I fiddle with the inventory a bunch, and I finally figure out there's a button actually to drop stuff. I think it's F. So I drop my guns. I've got this guy's anesthetized. I take the flowers. I go up through the main gate, and I'm like, oh, this is good. Okay, I get it now. And I actually save at this point because I'm done with the mailman. I never want to see that guy peeing in a bush again.
There's a lot of peeing in bushes
I imagine
in this game. It's the best way to get your opportunity.
Yeah, well, I figured that was probably like this is an idol that indicates this is a person who's occupied, and you'll be able to deal with them however you're going to deal with them. So I like that. I mean, there is some like affordance there of telling me what's going on. So I go up the long driveway, and of course I'm walking this whole way because whenever you run, it says, "Oh, guards will probably notice you faster if you run." I'm like, okay, I'll go as slow as possible. I'll just walk. You can't go stealth. You got to walk because what mailman's creeping up to you? And then I go in the front door. And actually, it's a good moment kind of going up the front steps because it feels very tense.
Yes,
there's
exactly.
Right, there's a guy next to the garage. And I did really appreciate that. Like there's a guy next to the garage and he's kind of giving you the stink eye. And then there's a couple guys on the porch, and there's a guy who's kind of roving around. So he was there one time I did it and not there another time I did it. So I know he's kind of patrolling. I kind of go up and I'm sweating. Oh, and I go in and the maid takes the flowers. And then I'm like, oh, crap. Now I have no reason to be here.
Yeah.
And I know because, in frustration after one of these times of dealing with the mailman, I just went in and killed everybody and did the whole mission as a mass murderer. Because I just was like,
you're not going to go through that again.
I wanted to kill everybody after the sixth time I dealt with the mailman. I went in a side door and just went in and just killed everybody. I just murdered my way through the whole level, killed the Don. And at the end of it, and it said mass murder, I got the whole end screen and I said, I know that's not how I'm supposed to play this game.
Well, but that's the thing is okay. Maybe I overstated the whole point about Silent Assassin. Yes, that's maybe they kind of glorify that being as kind of the ultimate rank, but it's not as supposed to. I mean, really, it is the hardest way to play. So you really can go in and play. What you did is fine, right? I mean,
right, but that's the big red line. You've got on that final screen, you've got oh, did I achieve my
there's
objectives?
aggression,
Is it
right?
blue? Right. And then that's the stealth that's the nice cool blue color.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's
then
true.
the aggression is like this big red garish thing. And I'm like, oh, well, clearly that's not the accepted way. I did it mostly because I was like, I know I'm probably going to have to shoot at some point. I should probably just experience what that's like.
Yeah.
Just to know, okay, I'm going to have to shoot people. And I played on the normal level of difficulty. I didn't get killed. I just kind of made my way and I kind of learned the whole level.
Yeah. Well,
I would say, frankly, though, that's kind of maybe the biggest bouncing off point for me.
What?
Is that I need to go and learn this whole level in order to do it, in the badass way, in the silent assassin, right? I have to go in and kind of learn all these things that I can't pick up on the way. I mean, maybe if I had played a whole game before this, I would have the kind of experience to be able to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But I sort of feel like it's pushing this, and this is really at the center of my bouncing off, is like it's pushing this assassin competent, agenda. That's the fantasy, right? It's like I said, it's the Jean Reno, it's the guy who goes in, slips in unseen. Like, I got it. I knew that's what I was supposed to be. On the other hand, I feel like Mo, Larry, or Curly, as I do it, because there aren't, there's no, there's not a lot of interface affordances or feedback.
Yeah.
It took me a while to even realize there was a map.
It's one of their weaknesses for sure. Yeah, for the visual language of what are options for you and how to interact with the world, right? Which they get better and better throughout the series. But yeah, I
sort of felt like the only reason this guy has this reputation of being this badass assassin is because he leaves nobody left alive, and then therefore there's nobody to tell that he's been slipping on banana peels for the whole level. Because that was kind of like my level of like, okay, they're selling me this fantasy, this power fantasy, not of a pure, badass kill everything kind of fantasy, but like the guy who slips in and, I figured I was supposed to kill Don Julie, whatever, with his golf club or something. I kind of got what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
And
it's just doing it, executing on it.
Doing it. Yeah. The execution and doing that on the fly, it's not as well supported as like a Far Cry 2 where you can sort of make a visual plan because, a lot of those levels or those areas where you're kind of doing something more complicated, you start elevated, you can look down, you see where all the patrol guys are. And even other like Far Cry 4 does this a fair amount. Or you have the opportunity to, you could get elevated, you look down, figure out where everybody is. They have some interface stuff that feeds back, like you can mark people and stuff like that. I didn't necessarily need that to be there. But I needed a little more.
Yeah. No, it's
ability to plan, right? I mean, especially in this first mission, I felt like, if it felt like the assassin stuff was more easily in reach in my first playthrough, then I would have been fine, I would have been fine being the lobster in the pot or whatever, the frog in the pot, and having that get harder and harder as the game went on. But it feels like you're thrown into the boiling water right at the beginning.
Yeah. It's they definitely, and it's one always has always been one of the main criticisms for the games is that it's a very rich, mechanically and systemically very rich design for their games, but the accessibility and the visual language and kind of the teaching part of the games has typically been kind of an afterthought. And again, like I said, they definitely have gotten better and better over time with that. And I will fully admit that I'm obviously coming into the game with a lot of previous knowledge, right? So I have the upper hand on you when it comes to all the different things that I'm observing, and the different cues, I guess, that I'm taking from the world. Even though I have vague memory of, these levels from playing them a long time ago, but I haven't replayed this one since then. But I mean, the like I said earlier, it's a game. Like one of the other points I was going to make is, as you know, I'm kind of an explorer player type. Like exploration is one of my favorite things to do, and these games are this other weird kind of exploration.
Yeah, they're a possibility space exploration rather than spatial exploration.
Right, and just discovering all the different possibility space is a good way to put it. And when you put, like I said earlier, when you think of an idea, oftentimes once you know what the mechanics and systems are, when you think of an idea, oftentimes they support it. And so that kind of revelation and discovery is something that's so like awesome to me and delightful when it happens.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. The thing is that I have a hard time connecting the dots often to be able to actually achieve it. So like I was like, oh, this is cool. I'll be the mailman and I'll go in. Because like I said, I had in between mailman attempts just gone and killed everybody. So I knew that in the upstairs where the guy was going to end up being, or most likely being, because he probably moves around a bit, the flowers were going to end up because they were in there. And I was like, okay, well, that's cool. So I figured the mailman was going to bring them all the way up. I was like, okay, this is cool. I'll just go in and I'll be the mailman. And I walked in the door and she takes the flowers and I'm like, and I do like that moment. I like that, like, oh crap.
Yeah.
But what it didn't have for me though was at that point of like,
your next option.
Not a lot of improvisation or a lot of direction towards that improvisation. So it's really hard to know, like, well, if I pull out I don't have any guns. I can't even pull out a gun. So never mind that. I can't do that. So I'll try going up the stairs. I can't do that. So, because I got killed again doing that. Then I'm like, I'll follow the maid. And then once I'm out of sight of this guy, I could theoretically have anesthesia and maybe, like I could have had anesthesia. I didn't have any left at this point, but I was like, oh, maybe I could do that. But of course he won't let you do that. He won't let you through that door. And I'm like, that was the point where I was like, oh, it's so like, there was a really good moment there. And then it didn't, it's like, oh, I've made a misstep on the dance floor. And my only option now is to fall flat on my face. I have no other recovery, So that's kind of fine, right? And I guess I need to stop thinking about this game as something more like a Far Cry 2 or whatever, and more like a, I don't know, like Guacamelee is, where it's like, you're going to fail a lot.
Yeah. It is very much.
The cost of failure is maybe a little high here, because they even limit like how many times you can save, which is, it's kind of counter to allowing that exploration. It's like, why would you limit how many times I can save?
It's a ham-fisted way to, and in fact, I believe they added those save slots in. More than one save slot in from the first one. I think you might have only had one per mission in the first one or something, or maybe three. Yeah, so very punishing. Yeah, I mean it's definitely masochistic in a lot of ways.
Right. I mean, there's and that's part of the era. I totally I get that too. But it's just some of the it's like those design choices really conflict with these other design choices. Like I get this. But I was like because I was looking around. I'm like, okay, so I could be I ended up being a bodyguard at some point. I was like, if I were to play this a 30th time, I was going to say a third time. If I were going to try a third approach, I would probably go and hang out and wait for the grocery boy to come. And then I'd knock him out. Probably not just long enough to change, like not use all my anesthesia or whatever, just enough to do that. And then maybe I'd go in and knock out the cook. Like, oh, now I'm the cook. Maybe I can bring food upstairs and nobody will look at me. I don't know if I can do that. I assume I can do that. It seems like anybody who wears a costume I can probably take.
Yeah, I need to try a couple different versions. I actually did not get Silent Assassin on this mission. I'm going to go back because I found a couple things. One of the funny things. So I don't know. These are maybe a little bit of like pro tips. Oh, I know. Before I go to that, one thing that I wanted to mention that I always loved. A colleague and friend of mine from Crystal Dynamics, Noah Hughes, who was creative director over there. He always described these games as murder puzzles,
right?
Which is a terrible term, of course, but if you think about it from a puzzle game perspective, it is there's a lot of similarities to that, other than the trial and error side of it.
Right? Exactly. Yeah. I mean, in fact, that's the stuff that I love about Hitman Go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, right? Yeah. Hitman Go.
The thing about Hitman Go is like, I mean, there's no disguises, but which I do really like that aspect of this game. So it's like I really like that. But the thing about Hitman Go is like the rules of what other agents are gonna do are very clear.
Yeah, it's very distilled down, and they, in a very modern game design way, they reveal them all to you at the right pacing. Right. They one mechanic at a time, and then they add, and then they combine.
I'm not even in the deep end of the pool. I'm like in the middle of the Atlantic, right? I mean, it's just like, it was deep water. It was deep water.
So fun.
And it was still okay. It just
fun for me. I mean, it's just fun to listen to your pain. Well, let me go through some of the stuff that I did. So do you? I'm kind of mixed. Do you want me to reveal any pro tips as I played that I know about, or do you want to keep playing the game without those sorts of, you know what I mean?
I think it's fine, because I think people who are playing along with us, if they're anywhere near as frustrated as I was,
I'm sure
they're going to want to know. So
yeah. So a few things that
I'll just pretend I'm not hearing this.
Okay. Well, a few things. So first of all, the running thing, to avoid the frustration, the running thing, because it's proximity based, you actually can run when you're far enough away from. I worked that out. Okay, yeah. So that's one thing that kind of helps move things through if you're frustrated by the walking. Another thing is that one of the pro tips that I tend to do is I will actually go through and barnstorm my way through a mission just to learn the level, guns a-blazing. Mm-hmm. And just basically mess it all up, just so I can kind of get a lay of the land. That's one of the first trial and errors that I do, just to kind of get it out of the way.
Okay.
And then one of the other things that I often do is, usually from the hierarchical perspective, getting the suit from one of the guards gives you the most latitude with where you can go. Yes. Right. Now, of course, yes, the mailman.
And I work that out too. Actually.
Yeah. So that's the first costume I almost always get. And that's what I actually did in this one too. Because I did go after the mailman first off, and then I realized he was going to be too limited for what I wanted to do, and I would have to redirect anyway. So I just went directly into because there's a guy that comes out of the side door of the walled,
right. When I went on my murderer rage version, I actually went in through that door, because it goes right up behind the garage. I was like, I'll get. Yeah.
So a guy comes out.
Yeah, I ended up with a guard costume. By, let's see, what did I do? Well, I tried a few things. Like when I went in, and then I was like, I found this ladder. I can go up to the roof. And as soon as I went up there, one of the upper level guards came out and shot me. Yes. I was like, I cannot catch a break. But I went and I kind of ran and got into the house before anybody came back out into the pool area. And then I made my way downstairs through the kitchen. The cook didn't see me, or back was turned. All that I kind of like. Around that time, I figured out that there was a map, and it would just actively show like radar, basically.
Yeah.
So it would be kind of nice to have and the game doesn't have quite enough sort of situational awareness for you to know that there are people nearby.
Absolutely.
So it would have been nice, like, to have a mini map of that just for the like immediate area, but that's fine.
Yeah, their audio cues are generally, they can be helpful. You'll hear people whistling and walking and things.
Yeah, so this first level, I was definitely walking on my treadmill while I was playing it. So I might have missed some of that stuff, to be fair.
Yeah.
So I went down through the basement and I went out and choked out the guard who was out in the back. And I got him with the garrote. Like, I figured out all that stuff. Like, you can stealth. Like, once I knew how to use the anesthesia, using the garrote is basically the same. And I got into that guy's clothes and could move around the house a little more freely, and get upstairs. And at that point, but when I went on my murderous rage, I actually didn't even kill the target. I walked into the room and the guard turned to fire at me and the Don was in the way. So I didn't even kill the guy. It was great. And then I shot.
He killed him.
This one of those shotgun guards in the top level.
Yeah,
it was good. It was one of the other things. Very Three Stooges.
That's hilarious. Collateral damage wins the day. One of the other things that they don't tell you that does end up becoming very handy over time, which you found, but the grocery boxes, you can put things inside those.
So you put your weapons in there.
You can put your weapon in there, and that'll get it into the house if you really want a weapon, which I never try to, I try not to kill anybody anyway. So, so I don't usually use that for that. One thing that I didn't try that I intend to go back to is putting something. You probably can put something in the flowers. And to your point, the flowers probably do make it all the way to him, and you might be able to put the anesthetic in there, or there may be some poison someplace. There might be rat poison someplace, like in the kitchen or something like that. And so, you put it in the flowers and then she brings it to him, kind of thing. Those are sorts of other types of themes that they go with. And the other thing I noticed, which I'm going to test out, which I think is probably the best silent assassin way to take him out, is the railing on one of the balconies that he goes on his patrol, the Dawn, has a break in it.
Has a breakaway, he hits the golf club. Yeah, I saw that too. Like, I saw all this stuff. I just had a hard time connecting the dots.
Yeah, getting to it. Yeah, usually can push people off of those sorts of situations, and then it looks like an accident.
Right.
So anyway, and there's some back routes with ladders and things that I found to get to the roof and stuff. But anyway, so there's a sniper rifle in the garage if you
found that.
If you want to snipe, which you probably could get that sniper rifle and then go back to the beginning, because the place where you start actually has a line of sight on the Dawn and the balcony.
It does, yeah, because you look through the binoculars at your target. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I thought of that too. Yeah. So a lot of stuff I did think about, and I do, like, I get your admiration for all of that.
It's the execution. I totally understand. Yeah.
It's just that barrier that's bothering. So we don't need to dwell on that anymore. I think I really appreciated the Kirov Park, and when I found it, the St. Petersburg levels a little bit more, just because they had sewer areas where there was nobody and I could run, just like run the whole time.
Yeah.
And actually, in both cases, there was a timing element. So, there was like a countdown. I was like, oh, it's good that I can, once I found the sewer in the St. Petersburg one. So to set the stage, you're there to assassinate a general who's in this meeting. And there's going to be a surprise in the middle of the mission about that. But basically, it's you show up, you're supposed to kill this general. He's going to be at this meeting in this building. And it kind of gives you the indication that there's an apartment building across the way that has a line of sight. So you know where you're supposed to go. You know who you're supposed to kill. And, what I kept doing was like going and getting my sniper rifle out of the room,
locker.
the locker, right? And then I'd start going up the stairs and there'd be a guard coming down. I was like, like every time. I was like, and then I'm now going to kill that guard and whatever. What I finally discovered there's this ante room that I could go into. There was like another locker room before that, and I had the opportunity then to kind of pick a lock and go into the sewers and move around a little more freely. I still ended up killing a lot of people. I think I ended up getting a shadow on the first level, Anathema.
Oh, interesting.
Finally. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I got natural on the second level.
Cool.
And the reason there was, and I thought this was okay, but I came up out of the sewer and there was a guard's uniform right there, like on the ground. And I'm like, perfect. And I walked out and picked it up and 3 guards saw me.
There was a guard's uniform on the ground?
Yeah, next to this truck.
Oh, he must. That's so hilarious. You know what? He might have gotten run over by the truck. And
I don't know, because there was.
I don't know why there would be a guard's uniform on the floor.
Yeah, it was really weird. I came out there and I was like, oh, there's a uniform, and I went and picked it up and got shot. I mean, I didn't die, but I just ended up at that point. I had to kill those 3 guys. But yeah, that was a really strange sort of thing. I was really surprised it was there. But I was like, oh, that's cool. You know, that's like a reward for me going through the sewers. How clever am I? Bam, 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 bam. So I did kind of like that part a little, quite a bit. Like making my way through that. I had to kill a lot more guards than I would have liked, even though I was dressed in the uniform. I felt like I had to shoot a lot of.
Do you watch? I assume you watch the alert meter when you're walking by.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. And I usually walk.
Because you can walk right by them as long as you don't stay long, and even when you're in the same factions,
Well, in this case, it might have been because I had already shot these guys, so who knows, right?
Oh, yeah, could be.
So they might have heard maybe they think because they hear the gunfire. Yeah, the alerts come by on the screen, and I'm often too focused on something else to be able to pick up what that's putting down, So, so it's possible that I just missed some indication of like why they would find me. But I did feel like that was pretty good. And like, at this point I was starting to be more comfortable with the map. Although the game doesn't pause and you can't see the world when the map is up, unlike in System Shock 2. So it's like you bring the map up and it's like,
Yeah, you have to use it at the right times.
Right, you might be screwed. But that's fine. And I went, and I really liked getting up. I actually didn't go high enough. I went up to the second floor. So I'm like, oh, I'm shooting into the second floor. I'll just go to the second floor. And I couldn't see everybody in the room. Right. There was like one guy moving. I'm like, oh man, now I'm not in the right place. And then I just accidentally fired the weapon. And I'm like, oh, now I'm really screwed. I had to restart. I had to redo all of that. A lot of redoing. Yeah, I didn't save a lot. Because it's a resource, right? So I'm also like fearful of that. Although I should probably save more than I do, but I don't know. Does that tie into my rating? I
think it does. I don't remember, but I got professional on, I think, all the levels, which is the one I think right below Silent Assassin, and I saved quite a bit. So. Oh,
okay. All right. Well, that's a thing not to fear too much, but I did really like the sort of complications that came up. Like there you are, I finally got into position, and there's 4 generals that all look the same, and so you don't know which one. And I love that. I thought that
spy was party, basically early spy party.
Yep, exactly. It was like this, and then. She was telling me, I actually already knew which guy. So I just kind of, because I had messed up the time before, I already knew which guy it was going to be. But I'm just like sitting there waiting for her to tell me. And then as soon as she says he's bald, I let go of the shot, and done. But what I didn't like at that point was that I couldn't get out without killing a lot of people. Like a guard came right through the door immediately,
So, yeah, I mean... So as soon as I tried to, because I'm always trying to get Silent Assassin, so I didn't want to snipe him. So I actually went into the building first with the guard's costume to see how close I could get to see if there are any options there. I didn't figure it out. And again, like I said, I'll go back to it. So I ended up sniping. But as soon as I sniped, I basically ran out of the room and dropped my sniper rifle on the ground, and then ran all the way downstairs and then walked out the back. And then I was basically in the same state as you usually are, where they'll look at you, but as long as you keep walking, you'll be fine. And then I got in a back of a truck, and it drove me back to almost back to the beginning.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, the trucks ended up being time savers because you can get in and they'll just drive you kind of where you need to go, it seemed like.
That's cool. Yeah, I didn't even know you could do that. That's not something I picked up either.
But yeah, it's once you reveal yourself, you if you're not quick, that guy comes in and he'll shoot you.
That's good to know about. Like, I didn't know I could drop it. I guess that didn't occur to me. I guess you can do that without going to your inventory.
Yeah, if you hit G, I think on the keyboard, if the default is G, it'll just drop whatever you have.
Okay.
In your hand, I believe.
Yeah, so it's stuff like this that's holding.
Oh no, I totally. Yeah, no, I don't blame you. It's frustrating for sure. It's another part of the unintended discovery and exploration is just like what the damn mechanics are,
right?
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah, they're just a little hidden. And then we can briefly touch on the third one, unless you have more on the second one.
No, it's just another theme that I'm going to go back and check out. The guy the hit that you have to kill is a drinker, and I'm wondering if there's something you can do with his drink.
Yeah, probably. I thought of that too, actually.
But it's so timed that I don't know when you could actually. You'd have to somehow get into that building before they get there, and I don't know how you'd have enough time.
Before they serve.
Although
the bottle.
you found an entrance to the sewers inside that other locker room.
Yes.
So see, I didn't find that. Somehow.
Yeah, if you go, let's see. So the way out is basically up an escalator.
Yeah.
Before the escalator, there's a room to the left, and it looks like it sort of visually looks like you would be going back down into the main area. There's a door in there that you can unlock.
I went inside, but it was
there's a door you can open, and there's a second door I think you can lockpick.
Oh, okay. I didn't find
that.
The second door because that's where I got my uniform. The guy that's in that locker room, I took him out.
Oh, jeez. Okay.
That's right. So I was a guard from the beginning. But then one of the pedestrians saw me, and it screwed me up at the end because he saw me. He would run to the guards and he'd start talking about how he saw somebody, how he basically saw me in uniform. And at the end of the level, I got out of the truck and the pedestrian was standing there pointing at me, talking to the guards, and basically revealed me. And I was like, oh! Luckily I'd saved on my way. But it was cool that was a persistent moment where they actually, the memory of that, that was a state for the pedestrian. An AI state, and he was there waiting because they knew that I was going to come by that way, and they kept him there the whole level.
Yeah, the AI stuff is really impressive that way. I would say that I do really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I get the sense from multiple playthroughs, especially of the first one, of just like things happen, and now the world, people know stuff, and also the information doesn't necessarily transmit instantaneously.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, what I kind of imagine in my head happens, because at some point it says that, they're looking for a suspicious mailman. What I imagine is the mailman woke up and he ran to the guards.
Yeah, it does take
time. And the
time.
guards radioed, right? And like, that's what I and that's why I understood, this is why there's multiple levels of anesthesia. I mean, it's like, you can do however many draughts that you want to do of anesthesia. I was like, I started to feel my way through those systems just as a result kind of imagining what was going on. Like, okay, why is this here? So I kind of reverse engineered what the systems must be from the sort of, I don't know, the way things kind of played out over time.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than kind of having that stuff up front.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know if I should have been doing an RTFM, but it's possible that stuff is explained better somewhere, and I just, it's not in game.
No, it's
not so much.
It's a it's a weakness of the. It may be. I don't actually remember reading the manuals either. But
well, by this time nobody was.
No,
we were all playing console games.
It's you can't. It's definitely not. It's not forgivable. They definitely needed to do more in that regard. And I'm wondering, and I hope we get to ask somebody about this. But I'm wondering if, though I don't agree with the decision, I'm wondering if there's actually intentional choice because they wanted people to discover and reveal those things versus handing them all. And that's actually kind of not as a quick aside, that ends up being not that there's a huge Hitman community, but for the people who really love the franchise, it ends up being a very divisive topic, because what they do in the modern games now is they really tell basically all of those ranks that I read out.
Yeah.
They tell you much more so in a very usability, accessibility kind of way. They tell you how to achieve all of those in the UI now. So it kind of takes the guesswork out of it. And because they have the complaints we're talking about, and I'm very mixed on it because I love that.
Yeah, that's not how I would solve the problem.
Yeah, and it's not always like completely handed to you, but they give you too much information. And so the community is always a little, is mixed on that. Yeah. Some people like, oh, finally I can actually, to your point, I know what I need to do and I just need to execute on it, versus I don't even know what I need to do and I can't execute on it. So
right.
Yeah, it's a hard problem though.
The more important thing to me would just be the ability to execute better, to be able to see more of what's going on. And a lot of that is actually just pure visibility. Like, you start below ground on the second level, I guess on all levels you start below the level of your target. So you can't like
so far
pull up in a boat. Yeah, so far you pull up in a boat, you're below the street. And so you kind of go up to the street level. So this is now the third level, Kirov Park, which played out much the same for me. I mean, it took me a while to actually do it. What I did, I went and ran and picked up my cache of stuff. I picked up 2 car bombs and a silenced weapon, and shot the guard in the head and took his uniform. But then I hopped in the sewer, and I had these car bombs. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And I went, and you can put the car bomb, basically, I think it's directly under the car, but it's under a manhole.
Oh, nice.
Because you can basically walk up this ladder and it's closed. And by toggling back and forth between the maps, I was like, I think this is where this guy's parked. So I had 1 car bomb there. But the other one, I don't think you can do that with, because I tried several different exits from the sewer. So I was like, well, I guess I'm going to have to shoot them anyway. So I made my way to the church, and I get up high, and I shot from there. But then again, I had that same, okay, now I've got to switch to my handguns and just fight my way out of the level at that point. Because once you make that noise, they're on you. Mm-hmm. And I did it very well, actually. I thought the shooting was like, it took me 2 shots, 2 headshots. I took those guys out. Like, it was I felt like, oh, okay, I'm a really good sniper. That was a good moment. I felt like, while it was happening, even though I shot the second guy, I was like, oh, he's headed right in the direction of that car. I was hoping that the thing that I was fearful of was like, I didn't know if the car bomb was going to go off. Right. I didn't know if there was something I had to do. Right.
Right.
So it's stuff like that too, where I'm just like, I don't know what's going to happen at this point.
Yeah. It goes back to the trial and error problem, where it's like the only way to know for sure is to fail and then reload. Yeah. It's funny. I was a little bit strapped for time, so I kind of did the bare minimum in this one, and I want to go back to it as well. But I usually never pick up the cache that they give you, because I'm trying to play Silent Assassin, and it's usually like sniper rifles and things like that.
Right.
So for this one, I took the easy way out. Once I got the guard's uniform, I basically just walked past the guards into the park. And as the 2 of them met, I shot them both with a silenced weapon, and then I walked out. It took me 4 minutes.
That's pretty minimal.
And I just walked to my boat and got in and left.
And you didn't get Silent Assassin for that?
No, because
you killed the guard.
Because I killed the guard, probably, and also maybe because the bodies were just left in the park. I don't know. Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I'm not sure why I didn't get it for that one. I'll have to go back and
well, it might be. I feel like there's you have to only kill the targets. It feels like
that's probably it. And so the thing that isn't, I don't think is the case for this game, and maybe contracts the third one, but from the 4th Blood Money on, Silent Assassin, actually the other requirement they add in is that the murder has to look like an accident. So
accident.
To get Silent Assassin, you actually have to go in, get your hit, and basically nobody knew you were there at all.
Right.
So those are the most puzzly, basically.
Right. And I like that. Like, I love that. And I'm not going to harp on it, but like, I do really love what this game is aiming for.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just, I'm rubbing up a certain amount of frustration against its ability to achieve it.
Totally fair. Totally fair. Well, at the very least, if by the time we finish this, you still see the promise for what the franchise can do, maybe you'll pick up the new one, which apparently has a lot better accessibility. And
yeah, I've been listening to Idle Thumbs talked about it in the last couple of episodes, and apparently there's quite a lot of depth in even just the 3 missions, I guess, that were in the first downloadable episode. That there's like layers of stuff that you can do, and they're not just like one-off missions like these are. Like that, there's progressions of stuff that you can do in each of them and things like that. So
layers.
Maybe. I mean, I do definitely see what this game is trying to achieve, and I think it is worth talking about and experiencing. And maybe kind of having had this experience of playing it a little bit this week will help me with our next group of missions.
Hopefully.
All right, let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and just kind of close out with some final thoughts and tell people what to play next time. Sound good?
Yeah.
All right.
I have sinned. I have done some terrible things in my life. I have killed many people for money, out of ignorance, out of evil, out of hatred. But Father, I do not belong. I'm not of this world. So why should God forgive me?
Hi, we're back from break. I wanted to quickly touch on something that I teased I thought we'd talk about, and Tim and I talked about on the break, and that's where I think this story is going. From what we've played so far, and don't correct me here, Tim, but I just want to put this on the record.
Okay.
Like, it's like, it's March Madness right now. It's like predicting who's going to be in the Final Four in like October. If you're wrong, nobody cares, but if you're right, everybody remembers forever. So my thinking on where this story is going, knowing nothing about it, having read nothing, I guess technically I've maybe played some of these levels on Hitman Go, but the story stuff is not really there. Right. So I don't think it, I mean, certainly I don't even necessarily connect these with the Hitman Go levels, even though I know they're there.
I think the only one that crosses over is St. Petersburg.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So no idea. But where it seems to me this is going is that maybe this organization that 47 is working for, the ICA, is actually who kidnapped through these Sicilian dudes, the priest. And the reason why I say that is because they're tracking these Russian dudes, and now it's like, go kill all these Russians. And I feel like I'm following this thread that's just taking me closer and closer to the people who did this, like that they're actually responsible, and they're just kind of like trying to get me to kill off the final lead, so it won't lead back to them. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure it makes a ton of sense on the sense, because it's like, well, why would they even have you do that? But I don't know. Video games don't often make a lot of sense. So that's where I think it's going. Like, I feel like at some point I'm getting back to maybe not the people who give me these contracts, but maybe the people who made Agent 47, like somebody like at that level, somebody in the backstory that is not, obvious yet, but like that, or the ICA itself feels like that's where that's going. So I don't think it's Diane, because I know she's got to go live in Twin Peaks with Agent Cooper, but I think it's maybe somebody kind of involved in him getting hired. Okay,
it's Diana, by the way.
Diana, sorry.
Just to be clear.
Okay.
I like your theory. I won't respond, and we will see how it goes.
We'll see how it turns out. Let's quickly touch on what we've been playing, which for me hasn't been much. But what have you been up to, Tim?
I am still freaking playing The Witcher. I love that game,
Bewitched.
and I hate that game. Yeah, he's the Lord of the Rings version of Hitman. He's going around assassinating people and monsters and such. Yeah, I don't know. It's just I think it's an incredible game. I'm glad that it's gotten the kudos that it's gotten, and it's just enormous. So I don't know. I'm probably only about maybe halfway through the story, maybe 2/3 at this point, but I'm almost 100 hours in, even though I'm not even finished with the story. So
yeah, that's a lot.
It's impressive. And I also got back into WoW, but I won't talk about that. It's a terrible thing that happened.
Yeah, that game's no good. I quit it 3 times. But I haven't. I was saying on the break, I haven't played a lot because I've been between Hitman and the hours I played these 3 levels. I haven't had a ton of other time. Baseball season has started here in Maryland. Opening day, as we record this, is actually tomorrow for the major leagues. So a lot of my time goes into those things, and work has been quite busy for me. So just have not had the hours. Have not wanted to spend a lot of time in the computer, in front of the computer, if I'm not working or playing this particular game. But next week, I promise, next week I will have something to report that I've been playing and enjoying. So we'll see. And then the last thing that we want to touch on is what we're playing next time. We took a quick look at the levels. We've played 4 so far, which leaves us 17 to go. We thought we'd do 6 this time, and then 6 next time, and then finish out with the final 5. So the next 6 starts with Tubeway Torpedo, and ends with something called Shogun Showdown. So those are the two endpoints for our next section of levels for those playing along, and we'll kind of work our way through those levels next time. Okay,
sounds good.
All right, sir. Well, with that, I am Brett Duville, your host. I am at Brett_Duville at Twitter. Tim, you are.
I am Tim Longo, your co-host, and Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end, at Tim Longo Jr.
You can find the podcast at DevGameClub, and you can send us email at devgameclub@gmail.com. The website is devgameclub.com. You may be sensing a theme here. And then finally, if you have an opportunity, it'd be great to have you rate and review us on iTunes. We've had a handful of reviews there so far, and they've been very positive, and we're really gratified. Feel free to shoot us an email. We've addressed some things that have come up that have reached us through email, including MP3 support instead of AAC/MP4 or whatever we were doing before, and also getting a better mic for Tim, which we have this week, and hopefully it really bears out.
You guys hear a difference this time. This is the first episode with the new mic. So, yeah, we're learning. It's the first section was a beta, so we wanted to kind of get our legs underneath us. So,
well, thanks very much for joining us, and we will see you in a week. And watch for the snipers in the windows across the street. Bye now.